Radio Retro Future.
Hello everyone, it's autumn, which means it's the season of Halloween. The time of year where people gather around the TV and watch horror movies together. Now maybe you're a steampunk, or maybe you're just somebody who likes a different flavor of horror every year. And I always wanted to make a top 5 of some kind, so why not? Now steampunk and horror go really well together. As a matter of fact, a lot of people find steampunk costumes very scary because of all the prosthetics and other kind of alien devices. But strangely enough, there's very little real steampunk horror out there. So I had to stretch the definition of steampunk a little bit. So consider this a top 5 of horror movies that steampunks might enjoy. With that out of the way, let's get started.
Number 5. Mutant Chronicles.
Mutant Chronicles from 2008 is a retro-futuristic science fiction film by Simon Hunter that contains some mainstream actors like Thomas Jane and Ron Perlman. Kind of think of it, Perlman appears in a lot of anachronistic fiction, doesn't he? Take City of Lost Children and Hellboy. I also recently discovered he's the narrator for most of the Fallout series. I had no idea that Ron Perlman was a retro-futuristic superstar. Anyway, the story of Mutant Chronicles isn't anything to write home about. It takes place in the grim future where corporations are fighting over the final resources on Earth. And because fossil fuels ran out, they depend on coal instead. So the battlefields are now a combination of World War I and II. But oops! They awaken an enemy that was sealed away ages ago. The seal gets broken by a mortar impact and mutants start pouring out. Who they don't kill, they drag towards the forge and turn them into more mutants. Needless to say, the corporations unite but to no avail, and soon the monsters reach the final capital. Ron Perlman's character Brother Samuel is a member of the Order, who were the only ones that knew the forge existed. And now he needs to formulate a plan to destroy the ancient evil for once and for all. Major Mitch Hunter, played by Thomas Jane, has to assemble a team of specialists and go on a mission to strike at the heart of the mutant army. Most of the movie is just that, stalwart heroes fighting waves after waves of mutants, but at least there are some interesting setups. They have to fight their way through narrow ruins, elevator shafts, and dark caves. But the best thing this movie does is world building. Also, there's this great dogfight, which is probably the best argument against coal-powered airships I've ever seen. The footage shows the movie is also very stylized, but it suits the pulpy feel of the production very well. For the rest, you knew right away it's a pretty over-the-top movie, but worth checking out.
Number 4. The Cabinet of Dr Caligari.
The Cabinet of Dr Caligari is a 1920s German silent film, directed by Robert Wiene. The story is told by a madman named Francis while he resides in an asylum, and takes place in Hostenwald, a shadowy village of twisted buildings and spiraling streets. Francis and a friend of him visit the town fair where they meet a mysterious man named Dr. Caligari, played by Werner Krauss, who presents a spectacle at the fair. His show features a somnambulist or chronic sleepwalker named Cesare, who he keeps in the titular cabinet. When he wakes him up, Cesare will answer any questions from the audience. Francis, his friend Alan, asks Cesare, "How long will I live?" And to Alan's horror, Cesare answers, "Until dawn." And guess what? Alan dies that night. You can imagine that Francis gets suspicious of the doctor and starts investigating him. As you can expect, the whole situation goes out of control. But this is one of the first horror movies of its kind, and this is 2 years before Nosferatu. To call its story and acting dated is an understatement, but in this movie we can already see the elements that become tropes of early horror. A madman, a doctor, a monster gone amok, and a good man driven insane by the experience. But it's also very unique because of its expressionist environments that looks like it comes straight from a fever dream. But the story is told by a madman. It's just the kind of madness that you would expect. Clearly it's not a movie for everyone, but it's an interesting watch for people that are interested in the history of horror.
Number 3. Frankenstein. Frankensteins Army.
Or The Army of Frankenstein if you're in the Netherlands, is a movie from 2013. It's a Dutch-American-Czech collaboration directed by the Dutch director Richard Raaphorst and is set in the final stages of the Second World War. When Soviet troops invade Germany, a squad discovers the laboratory of a mad scientist who descended from Victor Frankenstein, who is called Victor Frankenstein. Get it? They replaced the C with a K. It's done in a found footage style, which you wouldn't expect. Soviet forces fighting Nazi zombies grabbed me right away, so why did they need to add another gimmick? You see, there is this propaganda officer that goes with soldiers when they respond to a radio message and that leads them to a church. Soon they get attacked by a zombot that kills their leader and a soldier called Sergei takes charge. Of course they get attacked again and are forced to flee inside of the catacombs. And they get further into trouble from there. It reminds me of the recent Wolfenstein games, who also have mutant and undead super soldiers. It wouldn't surprise me if that was exactly what they were going for. Because they use the found footage style, you get a first-person perspective of the very detailed zombies. Unlike most zombie movies, here the monsters really steal the show, and just for their designs the movie is worth checking out. So if you're in the mood for some over-the-top movie, Frankenstein's Army is most definitely worth your time.
Number 2. Madame Putli Tutli.
Madame Putli Tutli is a stop-motion film from 2010 directed by Marcy Page. It's about a woman getting on a train with way too much stuff. Aren't there any rules against these kind of things? Anyway, she shares a cabin with a bunch of other passengers who all do their own crazy stuff. And one of them is a pervert. What is that kid reading? How to handle your enemies? I think most people that use public transport can relate, having to share your cabin with a bunch of weirdos. I only travel short distances on trains and sometimes I still can't wait to get off. But what if you have to travel across country? Then what? This scene is already quite odd, but when night comes and everybody goes to sleep, this is when the real weirdness starts, and some scenes get pretty graphic. It really plays into our fear of cramped areas and having to share our private space with strangers, and there's no way of getting off this train.
Honorable mentions.
One movie you also might enjoy is Repo, the genetic opera from 2008, written and directed by the same guys who made the Saw movies. It's a musical about a Repo man, played by Anthony Head. You'll probably know him from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He collects organs from people that don't pay their debts they owe for their organ transplants. I liked it the first time I saw it, but was disappointed when I rewatched it. But there are a lot of people that simply love this movie, and I can understand why. It's a very unique looking horror musical and there are not many of those to begin with. Anyway, it's worth the watch just for the songs and the gore. Eraserhead, a wonderful surrealistic horror movie by David Lynch. Some call it dieselpunk, but I think it's more weird and retrofuturistic. It's kinda like Dr. Caligari in the sense that it has a very unique visual design that makes the whole thing as creepy as hell. If you are a horror fan, it's a must watch.
Number 1. The mysterious geographical explorations of Jasper Morello.
This is a heavy, stylized animation short from 2005 by Australian director Anthony Lucas. It is a tale about the downtrodden airship navigator Jasper Morello. On his last tour he made a navigation error and somebody got killed because of it. He doesn't want to sail again, but the authority has assigned him to Captain Griswold aboard the Resolution. Beside the crew there's a passenger, Dr. Claude Bellegault, who happens to be a controversial biologist. As the Resolution leaves the city, we are informed there is a horrible epidemic that kills many people, and Morello's wife suffers from this affliction as well. But for some reason airmen like Morello are resistant to it. Dr. Bellegault believes it's the air quality on higher elevations that's the reason for it. That's why he travels aboard the Resolution. But did nobody consider it might be the pollution in the city itself? Anyway, the two men take a liking to one another and converse a lot. However, the mood between them changes when they ram an airship during a storm. They are forced to abandon the Resolution and make for the other ship, but it turns out the ship is abandoned. First they assume they must have been attacked by pirates, but soon find out it was something far darker. Maybe they cut something? The half an hour short is a macabre, very graphic story about men driven insane by their own desires and ambitions, and the horrific things they're willing to do to get what they want. It draws its inspiration from various places, such as classic monster movies, science fiction, and of course, authors like H.P. Lovecraft, and combines that with a Burton-esque visual design, which makes it a great recommendation for any steampunk Halloween. Well, that was our top 5 for today. Let me know if you enjoyed any of our recommendations, and let us know your favorite horror movies, steampunk or otherwise. And as always, make things your way.